Hello, I'm Pierre Spangler. I'm the producer of Superman 3. As you may know, there have been before Superman 3, Superman 2, and Superman the movie. Had been at the time an extremely successful series. Richard Pryor, who was a legendary comedian, had declared on the Johnny Carson show, The Tonight Show, so Johnny Carson was the host before Jay Leno. He had one day said in the interview, "Oh man, I would really love to be in a Superman movie. It would be so great." And really went on and on and on. And we heard about it. We were in Europe, as we often are, and heard about it. And so decided to offer him something. And in fact, wrote Superman 3 around the idea of having Richard Pryor. We negotiated with his representatives, and he definitely committed to do the movie. And so we went back to our old friends, David and Leslie Newman, who had participated in the writing of Superman 2 and Superman the movie. And they wrote the screenplay having Richard Pryor in mind. We went to Richard Lester, who had directed Superman 2, and he was also very well known for his comedy talent, and offered him to direct the film, which he accepted. And this is how Superman 3 started. As you will see, I mean, it's quite funny to look at the computers and all the things at the time. I mean, we're now here, 22 years later, and it's the world has changed, really. Christopher Reeve had first billing for the first time. Well, not first time in his career, because between the Superman movies he did films where he did get first billing. But it was the first time Chris got an actual first billing on a Superman movie. In the first one, of course, it was Marlon Brando. And in the second one, it was Gene Hackman.
Hello, Ilya Salkin here, the executive producer of Superman 3. The film has had so far, of course, a lot of controversy in the sense that, and I'm talking really here a bit to the fans, who are now, as we all know, so vital for all of us, filmmakers, television makers, writers, etc., because we know now what the fans want, or when they agree on something or disagree. And one of the big things that has been going on is that, it's a different film, it's too comedic, it's got too many Richard Pryor moments, God rest his soul, of course, not enough Superman. And I would say again, I mean, that it just was not exactly the opinion of some people like the first two films. Now, this film has a genesis which is pretty complex, because after Superman 2, who was, again, thank God, a gigantic success with extraordinary reviews. I mean, actually, some said it was better than the first. I mean, that's a matter of opinion. I think both are great. But the question was, what do we do? Because we had already decided, and my father, Alexander Salkin, who obviously was the commander-in-chief, I mean, we had talked about, we're going to do a 3. And Chris Reeve was willing to do a 3 still. And the fact is, it took quite some time to decide what kind of film. Now, in the very early days, I had written a short storyline that was really very different in the sense that, and it has apparently, somebody said they have even read it on the net. I mean, that it was being even considered at one point by Warner's. Now, Warner's was, still distributing our pictures, and we were independent, but we were really let's face it, working together 100%. And very happily. Actually, then Terry Semel and Bob Daly were at the command, and we had a very good relationship. And they were they are, I mean, thank God, they are both extremely intelligent and clever men who certainly helped tremendously in some of the creative aspects as well. There was also a head of production then called Bob Shapiro, who is a producer now, who had done, many more films and had some great ideas. And, of course, as usual, DC Comics, who by then now was really called DC Comics. I mean, that's been... When we started, as I said in the early commentaries, the first film, it was 74, it was NPP, but I think the change around the 80s, it became DC Comics, which in a way was simpler perhaps and more to the point. And a lot of the comic books were revamped, and actually some very interesting information I found out on seeing the Batman special DVD of the first film, which really, although I thought I was pretty good at comics, meaning knowing comics, really revealed things I didn't know that were fascinating. So the 70s were this big change, and we talked about that in the other DVDs. For those who haven't seen the other films or listened to the commentaries, it was an explosion between Jaws, Exorcist, Star Wars, Superman, Close Encounters. I think I haven't forgotten anybody in that kind of style. Perhaps, French Connection was more of a thriller. But anyway, the blockbuster was really, became this kind of famous definition and known definition for these big epic movies that were done technically perfectly, or as perfect as possible, and at the same time were fantasy reality, which is something it describes it pretty well. Fantasy reality. So the reality has to be perfect, but we're still in fantasy. And Star Wars is a little different. That's total science fiction. But even within the science fiction, there is a logic, and there are rules, and things are basically coordinated. It's not just random. Same as Star Trek, for example, which also was starting to appear in big movies. And I wouldn't bet 102% that it was the second one, but I have a feeling that Star Trek the Motion Picture was the second film to use that motion picture thing, or the movie. Anyway, we were now in the 80s, and Superman 2 had been a tremendous success, and I personally thought that once we agreed we were going to do it, that the way to go was really now to go much more into the sci-fi comic book universe that we had, of course, touched with Krypton and all that, but we hadn't gone all the way yet. And so I do remember writing a short outline where, and that has been said, read, because somebody mentioned it. So somebody has it. Of course, it's Warner Brothers property. They have regained all the rights, and that's absolutely fine. So there's no problem there. But, I remember, because obviously I wrote it, but, and not the details, but it was really pretty complex, because it was complex and simple. There was Brainiac in it, there was Superman, there was Mxyzptlk, and that's the way you say it, Mxyzptlk. Don't forget I did Superboy, so I certainly learned how to say it. Mxyzptlk, and even Supergirl. Okay, I'm not going to say exactly what it was, but it was really an alliance between Mxyzptlk and Brainiac against Superman, and Supergirl didn't know that they were related, so they were attracted to each other. Of course, they found out, and there was time travel, there were all kind of things, and they, of course, end up winning. But one of the important facts, and I think that's why I'm mentioning this really, is that Brainiac was the one who controlled Superman when he became evil, because he made him literally work for him. Be his super henchman. I'm talking about super. That's a super henchman if you want one, right? In my head then, it was very clear, because we always kept these movies for the children, and the adults could enjoy them as well, which was the case, thank God, again. But the children, under 8 or 9, they need pretty clear, and I would say specific facts to understand certain things. So what was there, wasn't that outlined, as Brainiac would push a button or machine, whatever, and that would make Superman evil. Or, again, somebody would sabotage a machine and we then become good. So it was much simpler to understand for a child. And that's really, I think, one of the important facts that I do a little bit regret, because at that time, I guess Warner's, even my father he wasn't against the whole thing, but I guess everybody was a little scared about all the big spatial stuff, because there was, of course, other planets, and it was really the universe of DC Comics with, many of their incredible and fantastic characters or villains and adventures. So at that point, we had, of course, many discussions, and everybody said, no, this is too far out. And again, who saw the show? Pierre, I think, said somebody saw Richard Pryor on television and with Johnny Carson, and he was, of course, hilarious, but he was also saying and imitating Superman and saying, I want to be Superman, and possibly, I think one of the greatest comics of all time, and a wonderful person. So then there was like this kind of excitement that everybody got, including myself. My God, Richard Pryor, he's such a fantastic, incredible actor and comedic presence and talent. And Superman together, wow, that's something. And so, okay, the other thought of going with all the Supergirl, Brainiac, all that kind of really took a complete back position and disappeared basically from the horizon. And we then started working on a script that was more down to earth. And what I would say today is really, I would take this picture as an episode of Superman. It's not like part of his saga, meaning how he starts, how he was born, how he developed. This is just an episode. Any television show will first establish the hero, and then there will be episodes that are completely out of even the main character and shift to another character, and that's the way it works, and it works extremely well. I mean, like shows like Alias or 24, I mean, which I consider fantastic shows. You're more on one of the other characters. I mean, that even start with Dallas and Dinah. I mean, it's nothing new there, except that it's very normal to think like that. And the exception to the rule there might be Bond, because it's interesting. Bond, now that I'm thinking about it, really was always the central figure. I mean, I don't think there's been a Bond where he was in second position or not 100% the leader. Now here, of course, the fact that Richard Pryor was such a fantastic actor and such an enormous star, perhaps it made the film really a little bit like, an episode of the Superman saga, and Superman goes through his problems and Richard Pryor goes through his problems, and obviously they kind of share the movie. So I wouldn't judge the movie as a continuity of the first two. It really is an episode on its own, and the tone of it also, of course, is different. It's much more comedic. In some instances, it's slapstick, like the opening. Okay, there were some differences of opinion there. I personally was not so enchanted by the opening, but at the same time, it was so well done and brilliant that, when you're doing a film, there's a point you lose a little bit the perspective, and everything becomes almost something that is great. And there were other opinions from Bob Shapiro and I think my father who liked it, and so it stayed, right? How much did we discuss? I don't think we did a lot, because it was still very interesting, and perhaps then we started getting the feeling that this movie needed a real different style within still the comic book colors and the comic book setting. Also, Superman, I mean, Chris Reeve was then at the maximum, I would say, of his physical power and build, and was really totally in control of all. I mean, he was since the beginning, but here he was completely, almost became automatically Superman, became automatically Clark, and etc. And then we also decided to change the love interest, because we thought that the story of Lois and Superman was really kind of, for the time being, finished or over for a while. I mean, everything can happen again, but they had this fantastic moment when they were together. They knew she knew who he was and all that, and then she forgot, and they're friends. And I just have to make a little aparté here, because I know that I'm linked with some of those reports, and I would say a lot of gossip and a lot of just uninformed news. Everybody said that my father and I and the others, we cut down the part of Lois to punish her, because in the heat of the moment of Richard Donner not coming back, which is very commending, really, I mean, commendable. Margot was, very vocal about it, and so were basically, Chris was not happy. But I guess, they had a perspective which was not our perspective, and they didn't really know what really happened, which I think I explained, and Pierre certainly also must have explained it pretty well too, that it was not at all something that just happened like that. There were reasons. Actually, I saw Richard Donner in '84 when I was doing, I think, Supergirl in London, and we embraced, and, all that. So things escalate, and people think that stays on forever. No, and everybody's friendly today, and I really don't think that there was any basic malice in anybody. I mean, everybody saw it in a certain way and from their point of view. And anger can be a bad emotion, as we all know. So we did not put Lois Lane only, at the beginning, at the end, to punish Margot Kidder, because we decided to go with a new personality, a feminine personality, for Superman. That was logically Lana Lang, which we had introduced in the first film at the beginning when Clark Kent is a teenager, and we even had this Brad guy there. He went to school there, and it was a very nice way of trying something, not trying, I'm just going a little bit different and not doing the same thing and rehashing the same story that basically was already done at that point. And to do it on the third movie immediately didn't make any sense. And everybody agreed on that. And Margot Kidder did come and shoot, and nobody really had to say you have to shoot, because there was no, to my recollection, no special option or anything, and she just came to shoot because, as I said before, I mean, I guess she realized that this was all a bit, that time had, exaggerated things, and she came, she was very happy, and everything was very friendly. So that's something I want to really clarify, because again, there's been a lot of that.
We were talking while I was doing the first two commentaries on Superman 1 and Superman 2, whether we ever had to make some budgetary constrictions. Here was one. I mean, we spared no expense for this particular sequence, but in the first draft of the script for Superman 3, this went on to burning half of Alaska, and it was an absolutely colossal sequence, which not only was too long from the point of view of the film, it would have made too long a film, but also put the cost of making it way beyond what we wanted to spend. We were spending quite a lot of money in those days for these films, but still, there was a limit, and so Alaska didn't burn. Here, the head of special effects was Colin Chilvers. He was the head of all the physical effects. Obviously, everything has to be controlled, especially those things that look out of control must be completely controlled. So actors, obviously, as I may have said before, just by insurance rules, you cannot take any risk with actors. For them, one even is not talking about life-threatening risks, but any risk of them being injured cannot be taken, because obviously if an actor is injured, the film may stop. That's something you bear in mind. All these action sequences, special effects sequences, are always storyboarded very carefully, so that you know which exact shot is done by which unit. Some shots are done by the main unit, some shots are done by the second unit, some shots by the model unit, some shots you know beforehand whether it will be a double or the main actor, and you just then dispatch the work to the various units for them to do this shot and that shot, and then it's all assembled in the cutting room. We had the same team on this film in special effects as we had in the first two movies. We had Colin Chilvers as physical effects. We had Derek Meddings for the models. We had Zoran Perisic for the flying and the front projection. We had Roy Field for the optical effects. I apologize in advance if I've forgotten anybody. But, essentially these were the four heads of department. There were some people who were in Superman 1 who had passed away, like Les Bowie and Wally Weavers. In Superman 1, we searched for a flying method, and that was a great difficulty and extremely time-consuming. And then finally, we managed in Superman 1 to make believe a man can fly. And so then on Superman 2, we perfected that with certain computerized motion control things, and especially on the front projection front. In Superman 3, I won't say it was routine, but at least we knew what we were doing. And so it was just a matter of dispatching the work and of organizing the various schedules. Already in Superman 2, we were pretty much in control of schedule and budget. And in Superman 3, it really worked like clockwork. There was no surprises, no overages, no nothing. There was a decision of diversifying in this film, in Superman 3. Unlike some other famous series where basically each sequel is exactly the same movie as the preceding one, we had tried to be different. Whether that was wise or not is for others to say. I think it was. I think we did something that was different, that was fun. And so amongst the things that are in this film different is that he is looking at a woman other than Lois, and he goes back to his teenage sweetheart, high school sweetheart, who is Lana Lang. Lana is a character that exists, obviously, in the comic books, and is a recurring character. But in the comic books, it's more Lana who sort of has a crunch on Clark, and Lois has a crunch on Superman. Here, it'll be sort of mutual, without giving too much away. As you know, Richard Lester, who directed this movie, also directed the two first movies with the Beatles, Hard Day's Night and Help. So this is a little homage that we have here with the music.
Okay, now we're in the scene of Clark going back to his alma mater, which is really totally different than anything, because this is a Clark now that I would say is almost like the fifth Clark, because we had, as we know, we had okay, Superman. Then we had the clumsy Clark, right? Then we have the Clark that loses his powers, which is really another Clark. And then we have this Clark, which is basically the real Clark. I mean, the guy from Kansas. And again, Christopher, who was such a fantastic actor, was able to, again, create a little difference between this Clark and the Clark who lost his powers and the clumsy Clark. So, really, again, he was extraordinary. So, the whole scene here is original, different, very much in keeping with the comic books and with the legend. And, of course, well, he's still a little shy, I guess, but it's not the clumsy Clark. I mean, now, of course, we have this not pleasant Brad who has grown up now, and he really is, I would say, a little bit like that guy in the diner, a guy you don't like just when he walks in, and an arrogant, mean-spirited person. And, of course, Long Time No See goes back to the first film, and, of course, it makes fun of the glasses. But Lana, of course, is attracted to Clark, which... Actually, we had a hint of that in the first film. I mean, she kind of felt sorry for him. And here, well, it's not a great thing, where you see Chris Reeve doing the wrong dancing. And, I mean, all these details that make you get more and more involved in his character. And, of course, the other characters who also do their own small improvisations sometimes. And, of course, the director helps, but the actors are still going to do it.
The Richard Pryor character was completely invented. As I said earlier, we had heard that Richard Pryor wanted to be in the Superman movie, and once this got confirmed, we wrote the story around his character. Computers were sort of in their early age then. I'm not sure. Bill Gates was a millionaire as yet. And so the Newmans had the idea of getting this character, Gus, to be amazingly talented in figures and in computers. And so this is what he just did. He just swindled all the senses that were floating around and transferred them to himself. He got $89,000. Richard Pryor, God bless his soul, he was really, really a funny man. He had an accident not long before this where he got burned in like 80% of his body. And the first thing he did, as soon as he was sort of semi-mobile and not an invalid, he made a one-man show about his sufferings in the burn unit of the hospital. And it was so painfully funny. It was really, really extraordinary. He unfortunately passed away recently. The last years of his life, he was crippled with multiple sclerosis, and it's really sad. Well, as I'm sure everybody knows, Christopher Reeve also, the last years of his life, had had a horse riding accident and became quadriplegic and became an absolute hero and an example of human strength and determination, and was fighting against the laws that prevented really cures for the spinal cord section, and cures that could be certainly progressed by stem cells and things like that. And he was a champion of these new methods of encouraging other people in this condition. He was an extraordinary man. This particular sequence was one of the rare sequence shots of Richard Lester. Richard Lester always works with two cameras side by side and has relatively little movement to his shots, but sometimes he just entertains the idea of doing everything in one single shot, and I believe this is the case in this particular sequence. We had a whole day planned to shoot this, and then I think I arrived like at 11 a.m. on the set, and they had finished. It's just one shot. It's like the story of Orson Welles and Touch of Evil, where he was behind, and all of a sudden he was 3 days ahead because he shot that entire sequence in one shot, the opening sequence in the film. Robert Vaughn had been very famous in a series called The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and we were looking for an American villain. And we went through various thoughts, but settled quite quickly on Robert Vaughn as being a man who could have the sense of humor and the sense of menace. This is what you needed to have, which he did. Pamela Stevenson, who plays the protege of Robert Vaughn, she is the wife of Billy Connolly. And they now moved both to the US, and Pamela has become now a writer and I believe a psychotherapist. She has an office where she helps people. She's a very funny lady. In England, she was doing a famous series called Not the 9 O'Clock News, which was a parody of newscasts as well. I guess very much in the spirit of what you have in Saturday Night Live. And then there's the one who plays a sister, Annie Ross. She's an actress and a very famous jazz singer in the UK.
Although Robert Vaughn is a wonderful actor and was a great Webster, I personally was very much in favor of another very good actor called Frank Langella, who had done Dracula, directed by John Badham, and actually had music by John Williams as well. And I really thought he would be a more, perhaps unknown villain in a way. He wasn't as known as Robert Vaughn, because Robert Vaughn, of course, had an enormous career with The Man from U.N.C.L.E., as he was the Man from U.N.C.L.E., and he had a partner called Ilya Kuryakin, which is not spelled like my name, which is I-L-Y-A, but was spelled I-double-L-I-A. But I do remember that all the time people would make fun and say, "Hey, you're Ilya Kuryakin." So definitely that marked me. So Robert Vaughn, he was also in The Magnificent Seven, where he was fantastic. I think he was in Bullet, actually. But he was already, let's say, very famous. I mean, people... Now, Frank Langella was still in a kind of career point where first his films were a little different. The Dracula film, although beautiful, was not, if I recall, a gigantic success. And I thought it was a fantastic film, but it was perhaps, I don't know, too dark, whatever. But I thought Langella would be like a villain that, yeah, we know him, but we don't know him. And it would have given, let's say, a third character with more mystery besides Superman and Gus Gorman.
In terms of writing the script, once we had established for good that Richard Pryor wanted to be and would be available to be in a Superman movie, we then met with Lester and the Newmans and said, well, here is the brief. We want to make a Superman movie, which they were sort of specialized in already, but Richard Pryor will be there, and you have to find a role for him. So they went away, and about, I'd say, maybe a week later, came back with a synopsis, just a few pages saying, well, this is what we think. Here is this character, Gus Gorman. He's an unemployed guy who gets a job in a computer company, but he's a wizard and blah, blah, blah. And so that all developed from there. I mean, this is, their talent as writers. They come up with this millionaire who wants to have the monopoly on coffee.
I think we were all trying, or with my idea that didn't go through finally, or with this film, to do something different. We were not going to do exactly the same template as the first two films, who were conceived actually as one big story by Mario Puzo. And again, that's the great analogy with Bond is always Bond, and when they try to go too far from Bond, it doesn't work. Now here, we didn't think we went too far because it's the mythology, it's still the legend. I mean, he's a good guy. He still helps him. He still uses powers in a clever way. And of course, Richard Pryor is just there when he's there. It's just incredible. And yeah, we are a little bit in a different tone here, but this is a more fun film. Let's face it, it's not as tragic at this point, of course. Then it gets a little more tragic, but let's face it, it's a little bit more light. But as I said before, you definitely still laugh with them and not at them. The Frank Langella thing, finally did not happen. He didn't do it. And then, of course, we went with Robert Vaughn, who was excellent. But I personally think that there would have been a bigger threat with the other actor, with Langella. So, who, by the way, if I recall, was willing to do it.
Brother, you want to be rich, right? I was born rich. Never worn the same pair of socks twice.
What do you do with your socks?
I don't know. They're laundered and sent to some charitable institution, I think.
So, passing that, we see, how this nice Gus just falls into all the traps. And happens to be this total absolute genius computer expert without even knowing it. But we saw what he did with the quarter dimes or the quarter cents or whatever, which, by the way, I must point out that in Office Space that Mike Judge did, it was, he referred to this Superman 3 very clever scheme of Gus with the computers, and which was really nice. A nice little homage. And we must also point out, computers in 83, we're shooting 82, came out 83, were not as, of course, were absolutely not as everywhere as they are today, and did not have the same kind of absolute access to everything. So that was kind of a bit in advance here. I mean, perhaps too much in advance, but what's pretty original stuff. As well, obviously everybody knows, it was David and Leslie Newman who wrote the script together with Richard Lester directing. And okay, we were not in space, but it was more of a comedy. And I have certain feelings, which I'll tell after, about some of the potential reasons why some people had a different reaction to the two films. Now, I still have to point out that some of the reviews, including Time Magazine, were absolutely extraordinary, saying that it was even better than the first two. So, you know, opinions are opinions. I mean, we're also making a little bit of fun of a lot of things here, you know, of gullibility of people, with all these commercial schemes, and simplicity of, you know, people trust and then they get taken to the cleaners.
By that time, it's interesting because we had, as I mentioned during the viewing of Superman 1, we had very, very stringent approval and interface clauses with DC Comics when we made the first movie. Very quickly, as we were progressing with the first movie, they were reassured that we were in keeping with the legend and in keeping with the respect that the character deserves. So by this time, we were really cool, and they weren't. Were they still, you know, obviously were consulted, would read the script, and I can't remember if Paul Hitchcock was still viewing the rushes every day. Certainly we had closely interfaced with Warner in terms of the script. They read the script as we were developing it. They were very happy, actually, of Richard Lester's engagement as the director. They were consulted on the cast. By this time, even though we were still independent, and the film was independently produced and independently financed by Alexander Salkin, but the distribution rights were, by that time, worldwide, theatrical, with Warner. The video practically didn't exist at that time, but they had it also. And television, we had kept the television distribution, at least the first licenses, the first series of licenses, we were the ones handling that.
Selma, it's a lot, Lanny. Have a good day now.
This is, again, the kind of stuff that, hey, there's nothing abnormal there. Why? So they I'm sorry, it's funny. And actually, I saw this film with audiences, and the people were rolling with laughter. I mean, this is a whole different world. Now, by the way, you notice that he has a very elegant bag, and I will not say the name because I shouldn't do any publicity. But it's kind of funny that the guy has a bag that is really very, very expensive. And there's little details, little touches that I would say in that case, certainly Richard Lester came up with. And now we go into the bucolic again. But it's more comic book. I mean, that's the colors, again, are all more following too. And it's not as mythological, perhaps, as the Kansas of the first film, which was almost in contrast with Krypton. I mean, there was something very special there, and the lighting, I must say again, of Jeffrey Unsworth was really unique. And of course, here the lighting is excellent and wonderful. But you know, there's just one kind of tone, and that's this kind of comic book tone.
The director of photography was Robert Painter. He had done also Superman 2. In Superman 2, he had to sort of adhere much more to the style of photography of Jeffrey Unsworth, who had done the first film. We had certain continuity between the first and the second film, so therefore Bob maintained the look of Jeffrey Unsworth's photography, which was quite a feat in itself, because Jeffrey was an extraordinary cameraman, and I think I can safely say that Bob didn't have any ego problems in copying or in following Jeffrey's photography, which was Jeffrey was a great master. In this film, Bob was able to have a freer hand because we had no continuity problems, and I think he proved himself a great cameraman, as we can see from the picture. He did a wonderful job, and this time, can take complete credit solo for it.
we're in reality here, okay? We almost forget that Clark Kent is Superman and, as I said many times, an alien, a Kryptonian. And I think that's an important element because he really is a benevolent alien, I mean, obviously. And I guess that's why it's so easy to just forget that he's an alien and just consider him as this fantastic great guy and just happens to have powers. But, I mean, I could go on and on with this with the fans, but it certainly is interesting to always remember that he is, I mean, he's not human. Now, here we're starting again, of course, immediately know that he isn't because he has the famous super hearing that he had in Superman 1 with the Lex Luthor thing with the dog. The dog's barking and special frequency. And the music, again, you know, is John Williams. Ken Thorne, in some cases, wrote new music extremely well. And again, we had a 120-piece orchestra, so I don't know why there is this thing that we had two guys playing a banjo. I'm exaggerating. Okay, now this is really good Superman action, and it's, of course, very, very, gratifying, and that's our guy. And, of course, the flying is getting better and better, and Chris Reeve is really now literally, I mean, you know, he really flies, I would say, because it's so perfect. You see that landing, and I must say also, that as we're now revealing all the technical aspects, which we did not when the first film came out, and there was close set, and I said all that, total secrecy on all the effects. The guy who pulls the wires, which is not an easy thing, is a guy called Bob Arman, who was the best. I mean, definitely. And actually, he also worked on the Superboy series, and well, everybody admitted that. Again, the flying was very good. So that, plus of course the optic system, and I would say in terms of effects, we're literally at the best here for this kind of time. I mean, we're still early 80s.
In terms of the marketing strategy, we did, I don't know if you recall the posters, we had Superman carrying Richard Pryor. So we were pushing the Richard Pryor element quite a lot. Therefore, the more comedic aspect, sort of promoting the difference. So I say the wisdom of it is difficult to diagnose. With hindsight, everybody has 20/20 vision. So the film did do very well at the box office. We did just domestically, I think, in excess of 40 million in rentals, which in those days, we're talking 1983, you could probably double that for today. So 80 million of rentals, you're talking then sort of multiply by 2, you're talking 150, 160 million box office, which is a very big success, but is less than what it was for Superman 1 and Superman 2. Had we done a remake of Superman 1 or something more similar to Superman 1, would it have had different results? No way to know. I think once we've accepted the fact and once we wanted to have Richard Pryor in it, we had to be more comedic, inevitably.
This is very, again, it sounds like I'm saying it's funny, but because I want to say it's funny, but it is funny. I mean, come on, look at the hat. Look at the hat. Look at the guy. I mean, this is as hard as making a tension sequence. Because at the same time, there is tension because somehow the audience already knows that Gus has a plan. Now, of course, Gus is also drunk, which is very funny. And, well, that's, again, look, the script, Richard Lester, and, well, I say it all the time, but Gus Gorman, the way Richard Pryor created him is kind of really hilarious. I mean, like now we go with this two-key thing, and which you've seen the film obviously before without the commentary. At least I hope so, because it's more fun. It's more fun. Not that I'm that unfunny, but it's certainly better to listen to it with all the great sound now that with the 5.1, and it's going to be really fantastic with the corrected image, the cleaning up, and it's going to be beautiful. It looks great there, but it's going to look, well, like it should look. In today's technology world. So again, we see this guy's clever, right? Because he's also strong, huh? Because he's carrying the guy, and there are no wires there. And, again, it's one of those funny scenes. Now, this music is Ken Thorne, I'm sure, and I think it's perfectly matched for the scene. It's so again this thing, of again some kind of he's not so good. No, it's absolutely, at least again in my humble opinion, absolutely wrong. He's a very good musician, and to be able to use Williams's bass and create his own in-betweens is very hard. Harder even than composing a score on your own. Now here we're really starting to show the beginning of, I wouldn't say Big Brother, but how technology is starting to take over everything. And, then there are the little gags, and, some people say too many little gags. But, who says that a computer can't go wrong and do that? Now, the man is wrong, as you can see, of course. And so he's making things happen without wanting, but the fact is, at least, there's a reason for them happening. And look how big those computers were then, and I think now a laptop has literally a lot of the capacity, or half of the capacity of one of those big ones.
Superman internationally is part of the common subconscious, I would say. Everybody knows about Superman, even though they don't necessarily know all the details of his persona, of his habits, but they know he's a man in a blue suit, he has superpowers, so he's known. In this particular film, for example, if you take Richard Pryor was a colossal star in the United States. He was known, but less of a colossal star in the foreign market. So there, in the foreign markets, you were more pushing the Superman aspect, and in America, more the Richard Pryor in Superman aspect.
Now here, of course, a lot of debate, angry or not angry, or, let's not say angry, but agitated about these two guys fighting. Now, frankly, if somebody can prove that if a computer goes completely wrong, this could not happen, I would love to see the proof, because nobody knows what computers can do. That's why there's so many viruses, things. It's just beyond control. So even then, hey, it was a funny computer. Perhaps not like the one in 2001, who, by the way, shows how advanced Mr. Kubrick was, in the sense that was many, 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 many years before. Now we're doing things that computers do. This is all. So, I again, of course, I'm involved in the movie. I'm going to be pretty positive about it. It's logical, but I'll tell you when there are things that perhaps, I'm not 102% as positive. And, one was the Ross Webster. As much as Robert Vaughn is a fantastic actor, but he was too famous, in my opinion, for that part. You already had Richard Pryor, and Christopher Reeve, who, by the way, of course, was as known as Richard Pryor or more. Equally, certainly.
It's quite nice how the things are sort of interwoven. You see, this couple who comes in is the couple who won the lottery at the Daily Planet, and who had their photo taken with Jimmy, who had the broken leg from the first sequence, and the lottery number was drawn in the first sequence of the film in the Daily Planet. So it's you have all these puzzle-like things, which are always fun in a script.
Meteorologists are baffled by the tornado and torrential rainstorms that struck the South American country of Colombia this afternoon, threatening to destroy the nation's entire coffee crop for the next 5 years. Gale force winds up to an incredible 250 miles an hour lash the countryside, while 12 inches of rainfall have already been recorded in just one day. A spokesman for the Department of Meteorology at Caltech here said this was, and I quote, the most awesome display of natural forces unleashed since Noah's
If I laugh any harder, I'll split my sides.
pattern seems to defy all known laws of weather systems known to science.
The epitome of extravagance, what we're about to see. You see, he has his little skiing resort on top of his building.
Oh, I'm gonna get you for that, you big silly.
Bubba, do you realize what we're on to?
Do I? Every time a drunk sobers up, he'll be drinking Webster coffee.
Why stop at coffee?
The city around was real, and we included the mat. We may have built a model and then included the model into the and matted in the model into the shot of the real city.
The oil.
Oil.
If Gus Gorman can push the right buttons.
I can have it all.
Holy cats. All the oil. All the pumps. All the tankers.
This is some nifty idea, Vera.
Boss.
Very nifty. Oh, just the man I
Boss,
wanted to
it
see.
is not my fault.
I mean, isn't it neato? What's not your fault?
Superman. I mean, how was I to know he was going to start doing his thing when you started doing your thing?
What are you talking about?
What am I talking? It was just on...
I would say so far the film is totally, even with the comedic tone, is within the children aim. I mean, the children can see it, and I don't think there would be any problem, or was any problem. But later I'll tell you certain things that I think that perhaps were a little too much, or not well explained. I gotta be honest.
Right? And he checked everything out, right, with his X-ray vision before he did that. And then he put these laser beams out of his eyes onto everything. Bzzz, 3 hot laser beams. Dried up everything, just like that. I'm talking about dried it up like the machines that they have in the men's rooms. You know what I'm talking about? The hot air comes out and you put your hands under there and you dry them off. Sometimes they don't work, right? But Superman's worked. And you think he stood around to take bows? Not this man. No, sir. He flies off again, right? And then he saw what really caused the trouble, right? He flew.
Richard Pryor actually came with, there was a team of 4 or 5 people that came with him. And one of them was his stunt double, because well, first of all, he was still frail after his accident, so he couldn't do a lot of the stunt work or more difficult things himself. Couldn't wear harnesses for too long and stuff like that. So anyway, he came with his stunt guy, and you will see actually a stunt that will be performed in a little while by this stunt double.
Here, let me help you.
It was a perfect plan. It was foolproof.
And we were the fools.
It's not my fault. I did what I was supposed to do. You can't blame me.
You
That's
ruined
what
it.
you do. Every time they make a
A
mistake,
lousy
they blame it
do-gooder
on the
ruined
story. Just like
Now that he's pulled off this stunt, he'll try and stick his nose into my oil scheme and ruin that, too.
Well, who's the teacher sent to the principal's office?
I've got to get rid of him.
But how? Shoot him? You know about him and
The
boys.
ski resort on top of the roof is one of those things that sort of typical evolution of sets that can happen during a production meeting, where originally it was to be a swimming pool. And then we thought, oh God, swimming pool on top of a roof is just so déjà vu. What else could we have? And we were thinking, and then we came up with the ski resort, because that had never been seen.
Where is Krypton?
It's nowhere. It blew up in space many years ago. They sent Superman here from there when he was just a baby.
Why?
See, I know some things.
This is a scene perhaps that the one coming that perhaps is slightly over the top. When he, I think it's here that he's going to fall and do a gigantic, basically James Bond feat. And it's funny, but let's face it, we lost a little bit the reality there. And I guess we were also excited by Pryor.
This is a real man falling down a real building. This is the stunt double of Richard Pryor. It's a huge, very well prepared stunt, but real jump.
So before, of course, the satellites being controlled by Gus, which is totally possible. I would agree with some people perhaps that the ski thing was perhaps a little, difficult, but then there have been cases of people falling from buildings who nothing happened, but it's a little bit over. But it got a big laugh. So now here, of course, we get into a more complex side of the film where he starts to understand things, and it's very interesting because this is where perhaps I said before I would try to explain where I was a little bit why I think that the children and some adults were a little bit taken aback by certain things. Although the film still was number 5 of its year, and was absolutely the biggest opener the weekend that actually beat Bond. There was also a Rocky. There was a big competition week. So it certainly was not a film that didn't work. On the contrary, it was a big hit, and to put that at rest, you can see here again. I'm sorry I interrupted myself, but how he can do Superman and change his demeanor. He, saying that he knows Superman. Of course, he didn't do Superman, but we can just see how talented Christopher Reeve was.
See, this is the big difference between Lana and Lois, she thinks. Clark is the best.
God. In a church?
This is very much a Richard Lester kind of gag. This, you see, the guy was just falling asleep with these.
What the hell am I afraid for? I'm from Earth.
Well, here we see, of course, the kryptonite, the strange kryptonite that Gus created. No, to finish the thought, I started before I was looking at the dialogue between Clark saying he will introduce Superman to Lana, is that, let's put this at rest. The fact is, if Canon obviously officially made the 4th film, and Warner's was involved in, I think, co-producing it or producing it. Frankly, I don't know the details, obviously, as I was not involved. It's because the 3rd film was a big hit. You don't buy an option for something that is not successful.
The film premiered in Washington. It was a premiere, a benefit for the Special Olympics, which traditionally had been a charity that we'd always been associated with, and Superman was associated with, and Chris Reeve was a coach for it. Well, I think Superman actually is a coach for it, and Chris Reeve was a great supporter of the charity also. The post-premiere picnic was at the White House with Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan, and the Beach Boys were doing the music. It was just after there had been some controversy about the Beach Boys, and some secretary of something who had spoken against them, and Ronald Reagan confirmed that they were his favorite group and invited them to this Superman premiere. The people in Washington I think showbiz, has a certain prestige and is awe-generating, I think, around the world. In the particular case of Superman, as I said, we were, for all 3 films, we were supporting the Special Olympics, which is a charity created by Eunice Kennedy Shriver. And their center is in Washington. So we had actually all 3 premieres in Washington, 1, 2, and 3. I don't know if, Ronald Reagan was sort of used to Hollywood himself, so I don't know if he was particularly impressed more by this than by anything else. But there's been this association, I would say, between Superman and Washington and the Special Olympics, which lasted for all 3 films. During the Superman 1 premiere in Washington, we had Henry Kissinger, who made a speech. And he said, "First of all, I would like to thank the producers for making a film about my life."
Personally, what bothers me a little bit when I see this is that there's a little bit too much of Superman being not in action. And literally in every film and every scene, he is moving or moves. And he should move somehow, or even if he just, does something with his arms or flaps his cape. I think that's a little too long, frankly. Richard is hilarious, but we're fascinated. But obviously that would have been very easy to fix in the cutting, but everybody was so excited. And as I said, the film was a success and opened tremendously well and had some extremely, even fantastic reviews. But this should have been a little more, I think, more Superman, less accessible. I don't know how to explain that, but I think he's a little too easy to, be around. And, it's a bit like a head of state. They're not there very long when they do something, and perhaps he should have. Okay, as I said, it's done, it worked, but it perhaps would have been a little better if he would have arrived more towards the middle of the ceremony.
I ask you to kill Superman, and you're telling me you couldn't even do that one simple thing.
That's a very good line. And, yeah, again, it's comic genius. I think here is perhaps what I do personally regret. And I guess as you get caught and everybody works together, so it's hard to take a perspective at one point. And he's moving here, he's doing things, he's holding things. It's not just like see there it goes. Okay, now here I think the big, for me, it's not big, but it's a pretty serious point, is that Superman is getting bizarre, right? Great acting from Chris Reeve. Extraordinary, actually, because you already see the change. And, that's what I said earlier on. If there was somebody pushing a button, the children would have perhaps been less, I think, frankly, confused, because the little children, especially the way he's going to progress, right? Now, already that, you see, why is our hair like that? Now, of course, adults loved it, and as I said again, critics, not all the critics, but some of the great critics just thought it was perfect. I think with perspective, it's perhaps a little too adult there. He's doing stuff, and we don't know why he's doing it. And for children, I think it could have been a reason to scare them a little bit, or a lot.
The aspect of Superman turning a bit bad is one of the things that we were most attracted to when the screenplay was written. We thought this was really a great, as you will see now, it evolves, darker and darker. And we thought that was a very interesting aspect of this script and of making the film different. A lot of fans were actually a bit shocked by Superman turning bad. It was, what is this? How can that be? That, I believe, was completely invented. And again, because of the close interfacing we had with DC Comics and with Warner, it is something that they thought was in keeping. I guess it's always a matter of being able to turn it back, which we did. I mentioned when we were doing the Superman 2 commentary that one of my regrets was not to have kept the model of the Eiffel Tower. Well, my other regret is not to have kept the model of the Tower of Pisa. It was a beautifully made model, extremely detailed. It was about 10 feet tall. And with every little detail, it was beautifully, beautifully done.
That's a funny scene, of course, especially if you're Italian, it's hilarious.
Of the General Assembly, 170.
Oh, that might be why we got a good review. No, I'm sure they gotta like it. They don't write, but they don't like. They don't write good things if they don't like it.
So full of niceness. I hate laying that big chunk of,
Okay, so now we have this thing with the guy and the beautiful Lorelei, and so the tone here becomes really a little bit perhaps too. He said the word there, too evil, in the surrounding of our hero, without a specific explanation. I know the kryptonite is something, but it's not perhaps enough for a child. I'm pretty convinced about that. I mean, personally. This is getting really cool, as they say, you know, they're all happy. And then the pranks are getting really more and more, more and more cruel, and definitely showing an incredible sense of arrogance. Again, where the kryptonite that affected him really now makes him realize the power and how fun and easy it is to use it to do that, for example, which of course is kind of cool after the guy ran around the world. I don't know how many times they passed the relay and all that. Gets there and funny. Now this is another point, which of course, you know, it's quick, but she's reading Kant, one of the greatest philosophers of all time, and pretty complex reading, if not almost impossible to read. But I mean, very, very cultured, of course. I mean, intellectual, overly intellectual, and we see that, hey, wait a minute, the girl is not so stupid or dumb or just dumb. Now, I like this here, too, when Richard has a nice suit, you know, which is really cool. And I think I even remember that he wanted that. So, you know, fed up. I've been dressed all the time different ways, but I want to be dressed cool, like Webster. Actually, it's like literally the same suits.
We'll command the pumps to stop pumping.
Then, I want you to program one special command into all these systems.
And this is very, I mean, pretty smart writing. I mean, now don't forget, of course, this was some time ago. Since then, many things have been done. So many films with computers, with logistics, with incredible technical gadgets, etc., that might look a little, you know, not that incredible then. I mean, now, but then it was pretty cool to think that, you know, you could come up with the idea of getting all those tankers to go one way.
When the film opened, it was extremely successful. Had very great opening figures, had a very high expectancy also. It did not perform as number one did, and performed less than number two did, but it was nevertheless a big success. There was some reaction of the audiences and I guess of some of the critics, especially to the part of Superman changing his personality and becoming heavy, becoming bad. It was this, we were touching a symbol there that a lot of people weren't accepting. Superman becoming bad was something that the core Superman audience didn't expect, and part of it didn't accept. And then you had the core Richard Pryor audience who didn't quite know what to make of him being in a Superman movie. So we were in a funny mixture there of, as I said, nevertheless, the film did perform what would today be considered naturally, you know, that it generated enough, even though we weren't involved in that, but it did generated enough interest for some people to make another Superman movie after that, Superman 4, which turned out to be not very good, but nevertheless it was made.
While Superman is becoming more evil, Richard Pryor is, in a way, becoming more obsessed by power himself and grandiose schemes And of course, he's more and more comfortable with all this stuff. And but look, the man is a genius. End of story. So some people said, "Oh yeah, how can he know that?" Oh, well, you know, there are 5-year-olds who speak 10 languages, and nobody can explain it. And Mozart started playing at 6 and composing at 8. I don't know. Some musicians will say I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's around that age. Now again, it's this whole act of Lorelei is kind of really, really cool because cool. I said cool for the 3rd time now. That's what I'm going to say. Awesomely cool.
Skipper, there it is again. Proceed immediately to latitude 30 north, longitude 45 west. There await further orders.
Hell, that's the middle of the Atlantic. I'm not taking my ship there just to await further orders, no matter what that damn machine says. We're supposed
That's a good reaction for a captain who plays golf, obviously, but he still cares about his ship more than anything else. Now, okay, this is another one that perhaps was... the subtext was perhaps a little too obvious, and as spectacular as this is in every possible way, I think little kids here were really baffled. I mean, they were baffled. And when I say, I come back with little kids, I mean, that's my reasoning for the film, not making even more money, because it made a lot of money, but it would have made, in my opinion, more money. And perhaps some of the reactions would not have been as strong in terms of, oh, it's different, this and that, even for the adults. Now, I mean, this is a really rough, clever adult scene, and he is pretty awesomely cool there. I said I was going to say it.
We needed to build a variety of things for the Statue of Liberty. We needed to build a full-size Statue of Liberty piece on which they're sitting. We needed to build a model of the statue. We needed to shoot certain plates in New York with the actual statue. We needed to shoot the background. I believe a huge transparency of New York, and which was then animated with lights and movement, so you would have the feeling you have the city in the back. This was one of these Derek Meddings specials. It was really a mixture of model making and matte painting making. But it was no longer a matte painting, but a matte photograph. This was the start of computers and the start of a certain conscience about ecology and what man does to the environment, all presented in a rather simplistic way, I would say.
Now that the guy really is, he's losing it, as they say, and what, could have been a absolute controlling force from some genius, maniacal genius, like Brainiac or somebody else, or Mxyzptlk, is more here, clearly a split personality, which, as everybody knows in clinical terms, or medically, in psychology, exists as, the famous stories of the 10 personalities, or 11 personalities. I think a woman called Sybil, and she really had different personalities, and so that's a mental situation. Mental sickness, I guess. Mental something, definitely.
I don't know if you noticed, but his makeup is also a little bit darker. He has like a 5 o'clock shade on his face. He's not the clean, blue-eyed boy.
We're really going into that follow-up of the Statue of Liberty, and he obviously is not after a statue that is made of stone. And frankly, I don't blame him one bit. But I guess our little kids are really a little bit baffled by now. I think then I had kids that were at the premiere in Washington, and they were small. They were 5 and 7. They were a little, wait a minute, it's kind of strange for Superman to do that. So that could be something that, in terms of the tone, perhaps went a little too far. Now this, I think, is completely logical. People get crazy when there is not enough food, or not enough oil, or not enough shelter, and it's everybody for everybody. It's not one for all and all for one, but it's one for one and one for one. Made a little plug to the 3 and 4 Musketeers there. Now here we have, of course, again, I think the proof that when my father and I and Pierre and all the others did movies, well, it's on the screen. I mean, this is the real canyon. That's a real helicopter. That's real people, and of course another unit. And it certainly was not done in a little corner stage, and it shows.
No, I cannot go out with you tonight. No, I'm busy tomorrow night too.
Now again, this horrible Brad. And that was absolutely fantastic. And, well, as you all know, she's in Smallville now and plays the mother. And I mean, she's great. I mean, plays Ma Kent. Fantastic. Very beautiful woman. Excellent actress. Now, you all know that when somebody's on the phone, there's nobody on the other side, right? So you have to act. It's not as easy as it sounds. I mean, that's why when I wanted to be an actor, I certainly didn't succeed. I couldn't even do that well. Nah, I'm joking again. Need a little levity here.
Where do I put this? Over there.
This set we built in what was the largest stage in the world. It may still be, I don't know, it's called the 007 stage. It was built for a James Bond movie at Pinewood. And we had used it before to do the North Pole and Superman 1. And here we used it to build the cave and the big computer for Gus. Chris Reeve, I think, really enjoyed playing the bad guy because it gave him, instead of doing just a dual role like he did in the previous movies, if you see the color of the costume is also getting darker. Instead of doing just a dual role, it's like a quadruple role because you've got the normal Superman and normal Clark Kent, and then bad Superman and bad Clark. Even though the bad Clark, there's no real bad Clark here.
He was very into it. I mean, he was not the usual Chris. I mean, he really got into that character, and that's what great actors do. Well, can be a little bit surprising, but... And let's not forget this is a comic book. I mean, we are in fiction reality.
I'm listening to you, Ricky. Yes, he is. He can hear me. He's got super hearing.
Now, the kid, of course, keeps, his emotions and his love, even if he doesn't totally understand. Now, this kid is older than the kids I was referring to. He's about 10, so my theory still holds, I think. Also, he knows him, right? And now we're coming up, well, this has been said by literally everybody, including the people who are not as excited about this film as the majority, or a lot of them are, which is, of course, the famous fight. And I think everybody agrees that it's one of the greatest moments in the 3 films that my father and I did.
I like this scene a lot, the one we're about to see Superman fighting himself, the ultimate schizophrenia. Really a very interesting concept. Maybe too far out for the core fans, but I think very interesting. We built that set on the back lot of Pinewood. We had to go through all the scrap metal and junkyards and what have you and bring all that in there. Again, you'll see the physical effects were very much Colin Chilver's design.
Again, we have the Krypton music. And again, Ken Thorne adapted some of it in a fantastic way because look how it works. Now, why the Krypton music? I guess somehow we added with Zod. And it's interesting because there really is not much music when, at the beginning of the first film, when Jor-El talks, and the only music is really when the spaceship takes off. But the rest of the music is really always ominous, which is logical because the planet is going to blow up. And I think this was a very good choice that, well, everybody did, because everybody agreed on that. A lot of, things are not just improvised, and sometimes they are, but this is really It's been storyboarded and all that, but I'm saying in terms of decision on music or dubbing and all that, I mean, we all talked a lot about, I would say, everything. In all film, in the 3 films. It's actually the music when they land on the moon in the second film.
Come on, chicken! Come here, get here. Get my nerves, but one time. Good, get it!
You have a bit of everything. You have obviously some doubles. So probably dear old Vic must be around here somewhere. Vic Armstrong. But obviously a shot like this, when you see them both facing camera, you need to do a little bit of special effect there.
What is fantastic here is really how his Clark is. Now, I was saying before of all the different characters, so obviously this is the real Clark, but this is not the Clark from the diner who was in love. This is the Clark. He's just Kal-El in a way, I think. I mean, that's how I can understand it. And without fear. Now, of course, he has the powers. But it's another kind of character that Christopher Reeve created again. So it's pretty mind-boggling, especially considering how complex it was also to, change makeup and the parting of his hair, all the details that made him different. But it's all in his acting. I mean, it's still all in his acting. This is really, as they say, good stuff. What is interesting too is when he's evil, he has a kind of almost fascinating attractiveness too. I mean, it's almost like Clint Eastwood in those Italian westerns. Just was there, and here he is. But of course, Clint Eastwood wasn't mean. But he had that kind of laconic. Look the way he walks. The man was, I guess he was really getting Siegel and Schuster talking to him, and the guys who invented the character and drew it. But of course, all this is Christopher Reeve, and it's basically, I think, I'd say in terms of film, it's perfection, at least for me. And apparently everybody agrees with that. Except, of course, the children who, by now, were, I'm sure, very scared and really puzzled.
We came out in the summer, which was the good time of the year to come out. We came out in what was a broad release in those days, which was, I think less than 1,000 prints. Today's releases are so colossal. I mean, you get 4,000 or 5,000 prints in the U.S. alone, which is something that was completely unseen at the time. You also had, even the advertising budgets were nothing to what you get today. Different market also, when a film worked, it would stay for a number of weeks. Today, again, after 3-4 weeks, that's it. The exploitation of the film is gone, and then another 4 or 5 weeks later, you're already in the video stores. Well, in those days, there was no video, or practically no video. The cable companies were just growing at the time. It was still very much a theatrical world, which it has, of course, changed a lot.
I think this is the greatest moment in the movie. After the fight, and that's why we need Superman. We just know that he's really the greatest guy, well, obviously, I'm gonna use an easy thing, which is super guy, but he's more than a super guy, he's the guy. And so was the actor. The actor was the guy as well. And now he fixes all the stuff. Again, a little bit of anti-pollution. And of course, that theme. There was a book that Robert Evans wrote, which was a very funny book funny and fascinating on his life, and he would end up each chapter by saying, a movie is a movie, a movie is a movie, a movie is a movie. So, a theme is a theme, a theme is a theme, a theme is a theme, and I just took that from Robert Evans, who happens to be one of my idols. Was an extraordinarily talented man. A great producer and executive, of course.
Well, if you're looking for us, here's where you'll find us. Do drop in.
Now we go, of course, in the other part, which could be too scary for kids.
Fun! The fun's just starting. Wait till Superman finds us.
Richard Pryor had a genuine fear of heights, which made some interesting moments when we had to shoot with him, certain flying moments. There is a true story, which you'll see it in the later sequence, when Superman at one time is flying with Gus Gorman, the character of Richard Pryor. And Richard was really, trembling, uncomfortable, because he had to be on a crane with a harness. And then Chris Reeve came and he had to hold him, so he came and said, "Don't worry, I'm holding you." And Richard Pryor said, used that famous line from Superman. I said, "Well, who's holding you, fellow?" And it was actually very symptomatic of Chris, of his, how much he had gotten into character, being a reassuring figure.
This is really, again, why these films, the other films like Raiders of the Lost Ark, or earlier on, we said Star Wars and the sequels, and they were just bigger than life. Everything was big. Everything was fiction, reality, fantasy, whatever. It was just what you don't see normally in your living room. Not on your television, just in your living room, or on a balcony. I don't know. I'm digressing. But this computer, of course, I know it was already mentioned and all, was enormous, absolutely colossal, built in the 007 famous set at Pinewood, where James Bond was, of course, shot. And the set was built for a Bond film and called the 007, right? Now, I remember when we were shooting, we had a gigantic plastic Superman on it to hide the 007. And I repeat, by the way, that we did beat them when we came out with this film. Not by much, but we did. No, well, more than, it was a nice difference. And that Bond was great as well, of course.
A lot of the budget, a lot of the money went into this particular set and sequence, which was the climactic sequence. As I said earlier, we built it on the biggest stage at Pinewood Studios, which happens to be the biggest stage in the world, or happened at that time to be the biggest stage in the world, the 007 stage. As previously stated, in a sequence like that, you not only have the cost of building the actual set and shooting with the main unit, you also need to build the model, you need to build pieces of the set which will react, you need to have a unit that will shoot the model, you will need a unit that will shoot the front projection part, and so forth and so on. So it's a multi-faceted, multi-unit operation, which ends up being quite costly. But this was the climax of the movie, so we needed to give it, we had a tough act to follow with the first two movies.
Let the games begin.
Don't tense up now, honey.
We shot this particular sequence towards the end. First of all, we needed the maximum amount of time to build the set. It was a very big build. We needed to design some of the graphics. There were a number of things that needed to be done, so that's why it was towards the end of the schedule. We had been helped by Atari, who was also a Warner subsidiary, in the design of these graphics, and there was the idea of making a Superman game video game, which they were at that time, a growing industry. I cannot remember now whether we actually did or not.
Let him have it, Russ.
That's funny that she kind of, I guess, likes him. I'm not gonna go on and on about it, but obviously she remembers that famous night. Even if it was a different guy.
What the hell is going on? Yo!
And our friend, of course, here, Gus. Coming down with the mule. And this is, that's the rocket.
He won't notice the missile until it's too late.
Remember, guys, no CGI then. Guys and girls. And older children. Well, although I think the children today are much more used to all kind of things. They wouldn't be... I don't think they would have had the same reactions like in '83 towards some of these more adult situations, like the Statue of Liberty, etc.
It was in London, because we didn't take Richard Pryor to Arizona when we shot the other bits. The other bits were done with his double, so he didn't go to Arizona, but he was in London on the big set. And so was the mule. We did not have to travel the mule to Arizona. We just found another one there.
So here, of course, it's great because Gus is going to first have his baby, a big baby. Absolute genius. It could almost, be a brainiac, really.
He's still coming. Arm the inner defenses.
All right, Webster, the game's over.
Hi, honey.
I don't know you, lady.
But the other night.
See, that's what I said before. That stuff that perhaps little kids didn't get, and they were a little puzzled. I repeat that all the time because it really could be... it's definitely a reason.
Computers. How do you like it?
I think it's typical of people like you, Webster. Instead of helping others, all the four of you want to do is help yourselves.
4 of you? You mean not 4? Wait. Oh, hey, man.
That's only his last name. He likes to be called Superman.
Oh, see, I'm not with them, Superman.
You could have fooled me, mister.
And now, of course, he's starting to realize that he's been pretty well manipulated.
The set was a practical set with a lot of moving parts of, you'll see the arms later on. Obviously, then you needed to add opticals.
People said, the bubble. Okay, make the bubble yourselves. You'll see, it's not that easy. Certainly not going to make it with a chewing gum. And he was really in there, Chris.
He's still coming. He's going to get me.
Don't bet on it.
And of course, the kryptonite, which in this case is the normal kryptonite, I guess.
You're hurting him. That's kryptonite.
Yes. This time we got it right.
You're a genius. You've invented a machine that can find anybody's weak spot.
Oh, the machine invented the kryptonite.
You're going to go down in history as the man who killed Superman.
No.
And now, of course, Gus is showing who he is. He's a good guy.
Wait a minute. Where do you think
Never
you're
mind
going?
him. Turn the power up.
Don't you think he's had enough power?
Turn it up. Power, more power.
Now we found a use for the yo-yo, which he's been playing with all the time.
And now, again, it's gonna get pretty crazy here when that computer is gonna take over a lot of stuff.
There's a current level of 7.
There was a time, I'm almost sure it's on Superman 3, but I wouldn't. I'm literally sure it is on Superman 3, but I don't know if on this set, and I don't know if Richard Pryor was at that moment on the set, but that Robin Williams came to see Chris Reeve, as everybody knows, they were very close, and they were roommates, and I wasn't on the set, I was in my office, and Well, they literally lost half a day of shooting because everybody was laughing so much. So you can't imagine. I don't know, if Pryor was there too, then he couldn't have been there because then it would have been a day lost. It's funny without being funny, right? Considering the price of a day or half a day on a film like this.
When Richard Pryor declared that he wanted to be in a Superman movie, he didn't really say what exactly he wanted to do, or, there were basically no strings attached. He just thought it would be cool to be in a Superman movie. He sort of enjoyed it, and I think we let him participate in the way he expected, if you will. I mean, the film is a Superman movie with these super feats, with the superhero acts, and he got to interface with those, and eventually to be with Superman himself.
This is, again, she likes him, she likes him. I don't know who says she likes him, she likes him. Oh, I think Jerry Lewis in the old Colgate shows.
She likes me, she likes me.
Because that's where I got it.
It's feeding itself. It wants to live.
And now, of course, okay, it's taking over everywhere. I mean, there's no question, it's big scale.
Just staying here. We'll go to the zoo. I'll do that tomorrow. And then we'll go into the academy.
Yeah, see a little detail there, Superman, super again. Now we're gonna get into that moment where perhaps we all together were a little bit too calm about the reaction it could have on children, because it's coming very quickly, as you'll know, or if you haven't seen the film, you will find out. So now he's a good guy, obviously saved Superman.
Don't leave us alone in here, Superman!
He is, again, clever.
Shaft is engaging the grid source vector. Right. We're through, Freckface. I'm splitting. Hurry!
And now we see, of course, how clever and how incredibly scientifically correct she is. And now comes the famous scene where, of course, it was so well done, really, that it did scare kids.
It is quite frightening as a scene, this one, where you see this transformation. It is rather horror-like. For small kids, it might be too frightening.
And actually, it's possibly even scaring me. That was pretty scary. That was actually very scary for children. And I don't know how many times I've heard or read about children who later said that they were totally terrified by this.
At the storyboard stage, the concept was that the sister was being transformed into a robot, so you had to have some human features, yet to have the robot quality. And from that point on, between the makeup people, the costume people, the special effects people, that creature was designed.
And yeah, she's pretty scary. I mean, actually, there's a little bit of Bizarro even there. I don't know. I mean, in the look. I don't think anybody thought about that then. Well, I hadn't done Superboy yet, so I mean, I knew about Bizarro, but not as well as after doing it. I mean, after doing some episodes with him. But here, of course, I think the suspense, everything is working 100%, and the only thing is possibly, yes, that some children were a little bit overly impressed by the scene, and that might have added to also the schizophrenic effect to perhaps have less children see the film, which is really my theory, and I might be, again, affected by kryptonite myself, so, which I am. But
we were talking about the practical parts of the set earlier. Well, here they are. They're moving. And there's two arms. The actual sequence itself was, I think, 3 weeks, something like that. It was quite a long shoot. Exceptionally long for Richard Lester, because he normally is a very, very quick director. And here he just had to give it the time. There was a lot of physical action, a lot of things happening.
Okay, so again, we see how clever he is now. I mean, he always comes up with the brain, comes up with the idea. It's not just the force. We had that at the end of 2. That's pretty spectacular stuff also for a non-CGI period of filming. Opticals had to be just painted, one by one on the frame. I mean, it was very, very, very long and complex and delicate work. Okay, now here we almost blew the whole stage, the 007, which thank God we didn't, because of course they would have been pretty angry at the Bond family.
This was a model. It's hard to see. I mean, Derek Meadows was such an artist. It's hard to see when what is model, what is real. We had weeks of shooting in other units in addition to the main unit.
I can't remember if they shot, because one of the big scenes, I think that's when they built when they shot Moonraker, and they had the entire submarines. They had 3 submarines in that enormous set. I might be wrong.
This is the moral. You don't have dead people in Superman, so we had to show that she had recovered.
Well, of course, he's going to save Gus.
Thank you, brother.
I think that's great. Now, again, I mean, obviously those villains were no longer. I mean, so it was reality. I mean, with fiction, but it was reality. But we just never showed anything that was bloody or horrible. Of course, as I said, the Vera transformation and the bad Superman were perhaps a little bit too strong for kids.
See the danger. I just went in there with a plain old can of acid. The machine didn't know that when that stuff gets hot enough, it'll eat through anything.
Now, this is pretty cool, too, huh? Richard Pryor flying with Superman.
Acid indigestion.
But what's going to happen to Rust and Boss and the other 2 ladies?
Well, they're going to have to see the police now.
Oh, so you see, they're not dead. I was wrong. So I guess they were buried under the rocks.
Now this is the real stuff, the real shot where Chris told him, "I'm holding you." This was shot in the old Battersea Power Station. It was a huge power station by the side of the River Thames in London, and where you still had all these coal, because it was a power station which was operated by coal. It was already discarded at that time, and it has been standing ever since. It's been a classified building in England, and they didn't know what to do with it, and there's been all sorts of plans of creating it as an arts center, as a museum, as a this, as that. Thing they're now slowly starting to sort of clean it and make something with it, which I think is going to be an entertainment center and art school, and it's a beautiful building with 4 chimneys, only 3 of which are practical. The 4th one was there only for aesthetic reasons, for balancing the symmetry. After that, I realize we don't see any one of them.
I think I'll take that bus. Can you tell me where the bus station is, please?
Yeah, about 9-10 miles over there.
9 or 10 miles. Okay. Hey, you already flew with him. Superman? Have you ever seen Superman before?
No.
Oh, you don't know about me and him? Me and Superman?
That's a great line. Actually, in memory of Richard Pryor, who was a wonderful man, on my company's website, we put that line. Me and Superman, we're buddies, whatever. The line was wonderful.
The sort of thoughts as we're coming to the close of this, practically by the time we finished and released this film, it had taken about 10 years from the time we started thinking about Superman, went to negotiate. And as I said before, I stayed 6 weeks in New York negotiating the integrity of character. with DC Comics, and where they wanted to make sure that these producers wouldn't destroy their character, destroy their Superman. And here we were, 10 years later, practically, having made, I think to some extent, having made a bit of history, certainly, with those 3 movies. It was the first really successful, important comic book-based film series. Thereafter, other movies came along, such as Batman, such as X-Men, such as a lot of others. But we, I think we can be proud of what had been done. I think we did entertain audiences. Well, I'm actually very curious to see what will have been done now with this, the film by Bryan Singer, which is about to come out in a few months. In fact, more than 30 years after we started out with the first one. It's going to be very interesting. It will be also, it is fun to think that at the time I was in New York negotiating with DC Comics. DC Comics called an executive from Warner Brothers and said, we got these producers from Europe who want to make a movie from Superman. And the executive said, it'll never make a movie. This is a nice, fun thought to close this one.
And here is Margot, and she certainly wasn't unhappy to be there. It's from my recollection. Well, now, of course, a little competition coming in.
Why don't I take you to lunch and you can tell me all about it?
Oh, I'd love to, Lois, but today I'm having lunch with Mr. White's new secretary. Bye, Lana.
Hi, Clark.
Oh, Lana. Lois, say hello to Lana Lang, Smallville's newest gift.
That's pretty cool.
Nice to meet you, Miss Lang. I like your writing a lot.
Thank you. I like your sparkler a lot.
Oh, me too. I couldn't believe it when Clark gave it to me.
Now she's very finally noticing Clark. And there was always a little bit of jealousy, I guess, with Clark towards Superman, Superman towards Clark and all that. But of course, nothing like that split personality of total evil and total good. Which is, but yeah, Well, we saw in Superman 2 why he wanted to be human and realized then he couldn't yet. His destiny is to be a tremendously strong positive force on this earth, or the universe, according to the comics, of course, and the cosmos, etc., etc. Okay, now, this is, in cinema terms, it's like, you pay it off, and again, if you're Italian, it's very funny because the guy is really absolutely Italian. This is an episode of Superman. This is not his quest or his questions, etc.
Here's our famous trademark closing shot, which was the same 2 shots closed Superman 1 and Superman 2. Chris's wonderful smile at the camera.
I will, take this and role to pay tribute to all the wonderful people and extraordinary people who participated in the 3 films. And as we all know, many of them have left us, and I guess they'll be around forever, led by the shining light of Superman. Extraordinary team. On a just side note, quickly, is that at the end of Superman 3, which was a success, as I think I explained and made people understand, because there would not have been a 4. Like there would not have been a second one if the first would not have worked. I think that certainly Lester, the Newmans, Christopher Reeve at that time or point said he didn't want to do another Superman, and nobody wanted to do another Superman. And I personally thought that, you come to a point where okay, perhaps there's something to do, but perhaps in the future, give it some rest. And that's when I was able to agree with my father to do Supergirl, which of course was very different and was really perhaps a little in advance in its time. First superhero woman. Superman 4 was of course done by other producers, and that's a story for Superman 4, whoever will comment. But let's face it, without Siegel and Schuster, there would have been no Superman. And without Alexander Salkind, there would have been certainly not these films, perhaps other films. But I guess, as they say, that's all, folks. Thank you very much.
This is Pierre Spangler. I'm the producer of the film. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show.